welcome to Ambassador Naor Gilon, and very special for me because he's a very dear friend as well. So thank you very much for taking time to be with us, Ambassador. It's really a pleasure for us.
Thank you, Nikhil, for inviting me.
Ambassador, you have the rare distinction of having served as advisor to 3 prime ministers of Israel, and you've been an outstanding diplomat for your country for more than 3 decades. Before taking on your assignment in India, Sri Lanka, and Bhutan, you had been Israel's ambassador to the Netherlands, Italy, and San Marino. You've also held important diplomatic positions in the United States and the United Nations. Thank you for joining us today, and a very warm welcome to you. We look forward to hearing your views and prognosis on the Indo-Israel relations and our cooperation, as well as how we could help shape a new global order. Ladies and gentlemen, India and Israel are the linchpins of the emerging global order, and the 2 countries are getting ever closer. Both countries are the key powers in their respective regions, and at this point in history, there is a convergence in their foreign policy and their security interests. Quite organically, India and Israel are pulled together in their cooperation on economic, security, technological, and geopolitical issues. Both India and Israel are central to the I2U2 Quad alliance. During the past decade, there's been a boom in India-Israel relations. The prime ministers on both sides admire each other and share many aspects, both ideologically as well as in terms of directions of the relations in common. And that has led to a strengthening of bilateral relations, both on the foreign policy side as well as on the economic front. Also, during the last decade, there has been a surge in mutual trade in gems, defense, water, energy, space, the digital economy, cybersecurity, surveillance, pharmaceuticals, and a variety of different sectors, including entertainment. But there's always scope for more, and hopefully we can delve into this question later during the question and answers with the ambassador. AIMA has also taken a delegation to Israel, as Rekha had pointed out in the beginning of this session, and which was appreciated very much by all our members. And we look forward to taking future delegations to Israel as well, and look forward to your support there, Ambassador. In fact, India and Israel cooperated in multiple different forms over the past 50 years. And this is also before India had full diplomatic relations with Israel, which is covered, I think, 31 years now formally. This covered not only the 1971 war, where India procured arms from Israel, but increasingly so in more recent areas, including the Kargil conflict, where Israel was our key supplier at a point in time where the United States had sanctions on India. Israel has been our fair weather friend and has stood by us in multiple different situations, not only in the arms and defense space, but we increasingly see Israel as a partner in development. And this is really the basis of where the relationship is today. And we look forward, Ambassador, to hearing your views on how we can expand the nature and scope of this relationship. I'd like to open the floor to you, to questions and answers, post some introductory comments from you. And for members of the audience who are participating here today, I'd appreciate it if you could write your questions for the ambassador on the comments section, and I will try to get to them. Of course, it may be difficult to get to all the questions, but broadly, I would like to cover the questions in the format of the economic engagement, how we can deepen those, the relationship that we have on the bilateral relations, the geopolitical level in which we exist today, given the fear that India has about the increased sinification of the region and the aggressive push that China has in this region, but also in terms of how the cooperation between India and Israel can be taken to third countries and into new areas. So with that, Ambassador, to you.
So I'm very honored to speak to such a respectable forum, lucrative forum. I don't know if many people know that Nikhil, beyond being a friend, we are friends because he's done so much to advance the cooperation and the dialogue between our 2 countries. He's co-chairing one of the, I think, the best or strongest dialogue that there is between India and Israel, going already for years in different fields, strategic ones, economic ones, But in general, as an opening remarks, I'd probably say that, and I think you touched it, our relations are far more advanced than you would expect after 31 years of full diplomatic relations. And if you try to understand why, I think it's because our relations really emotionally are going much, much deeper than that, much longer than that. It started probably over 2,000 years ago when the first Jews, according to our knowledge, arrived in Kerala, Cochin, and were living in India for centuries, thousands of years. And one of the only places, if not the only one in the place in the world that where Jews were not persecuted for their religion or for any other reason. And you saw Jews also excelling in Indian society. One known example in the economy, for example, is the Sassoon family in Mumbai, where you would find today the Sassoon Docks Library, Hospital, and Foundation that is still there when the family is already for many years not living in India. You would find in more modern history people like General Jacobs, who has an important a Jew, of course, with an important role, I think, in modern Indian history. So you have these examples. It's the historical connection, and of course, about 80,000 strong Indian diaspora in Israel. Very few Jews today, few thousands living in India, but a strong presence in Israel, and they bring the culture and they are the bridge there. And you continue into First World War, where Indian soldiers are the ones who conquered Israel, not only Israel, 30 years later became Israel, but a big chunk of our region as part of the Anglo-Indian army from the Ottoman Empire. 30 years later, as I said, it led to the establishment of Israel, and there are more than 900 Indian soldiers buried in Israel, and we remember this legacy. And every time Indian dignitaries come to Israel, we also go and remember them together. And not far from the embassy, we have the Haifa Chowk, the square, circle. And so it's very much alive, I think, also this history. So, and when Israel was established few months after India, the relations did not start very well, to be frank. India did not support the resolution in the UN, and only 3 years later, in 1950, did it acknowledge Israel formally. But I think that in the last 31 years, as you said, Nikhil, since we established full diplomatic relations, or earlier than that in the defense field, we already had, we were running forward. I think things were already in a momentum because of the history, and I think the deep appreciation. I've been an ambassador or a diplomat in, this is my 6th country, I believe, if I'm not counting wrong. And I saw pockets of support to Israel, but the wide support and admiration there is in India towards Israel, I haven't seen that deep so far, I must admit. So this is very, very strong. And maybe we started in defense, and then agriculture and water technologies for irrigation and others came in. But I think that especially in the last 6-7 years, since the visits of Prime Minister Modi to Israel in 2017, and a few months later, 2018, the visit of Prime Minister Netanyahu to India, our relations took a totally different direction and shape. We elevated the relations to strategic partnership, and it's not only by name, it's by nature. I think there is no topic today that we don't work together and cooperate. There are no limits to our cooperation. There is mutual trust. And if we take one trade number, just to understand that when we established our relation 31 years ago, our trade was around $200 million. And today we have surpassed, without defense elements, the $10 billion mark. Services is becoming a more significant part, which is also very important to us. I think I'll stop here and be more relevant for answering your question.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Firstly, I have to apologize because I think as a member just pointed out to me that I referred to Israel as a fair weather friend, and I meant that Israel is not a fair weather friend to India. It is actually an all weather friend. and it is one of our most trusted relations, as you had pointed out. On the strategic, as the relation has been elevated to a strategic relationship, the question naturally becomes, how can we elevate that further to a strategic and comprehensive relationship? So, Ambassador, geopolitically, we're in a very difficult space in the world. You have the Ukraine crisis, you have expansionist tendencies of China, and we directly have a border conflict which is ongoing even to today with China. I believe that the United States is putting equal pressure on Israel to also choose in some manner to be aligned with its view on China. So this is a two-part question, Ambassador. Given this environment, is this a bilateral issue between India and Israel? Is China a bilateral issue? And secondly, on the I2U2, which is a quad relationship, which does not at the current point in time have military a military significance. How would you define the success of the I2U2, and on what parameters would you like it to be judged? So two separate questions, but I think they're more regional than geopolitical in that manner.
So let me be diplomatic in answering and say that for Israel, the fact that there is now a reapproachment or closeness between India and the US is very, very, very convenient to us, because two of our biggest friends in the world are working together now, and we feel very comfortable. You know that it's no secret that the US is the biggest backer of Israel ever, and I believe that India is becoming from a great power, it's on the march to being a superpower, not tomorrow, not in 2 years probably, but years to come. Size of population, the growth of the economy, the importance. We can see that many, many countries are courting India. And by the way, this is one of our biggest problems. We have the trust and everything between us, but there is a huge, huge gap in capacity. India is 150 times bigger than Israel, more or less, 140, 150 in population and land, more or less. And this is something that is very high. The capacity of Israel to cooperate with India, well, the demand side here is much greater than the supply capacity of Israel. So we try to do capacity building and other ways in order to gap these problems. But I would say that China is not a bilateral issue between us, not at all. We are working directly regardless. I think that the things we can do with India are limitless, especially when the Americans are supporting us in the sense of defense, for example. We have understandings with the Americans that in certain systems we should coordinate with the Americans. Today, we find the Americans as our competitors. So if until not too long ago, the Americans were reluctant to sell certain technologies to India, now they're competing with Israel, who's selling these technologies for quite a time. So I think we are on the right path also there. When you mentioned I2U2, I think, you know what is the success of the I2U2? The fact that we have I2U2. Think of the history of the Middle East. I was in a book launching this week of the book, but the title was The Arab-Israeli Conflict. So for a long time, there was this perception, also in India, being part of the non-aligned movement, that the Arab-Israeli conflict is the defining element of the Middle East. What happened 3 years ago with the Abraham Accords, in which it started with UAE and Bahrain, but continued then joining them Morocco and Sudan, started a process which is a total change, because I believe it started with the Arab Spring and also with the growth of new generation of leaders in the Middle East. These leaders, their aim is to bring growth to their countries and modernize their countries. Look all across. I mean, UAE is an example, Saudi Arabia is an example. And I believe that they understood that speaking of the Arab-Israeli conflict as the things that defines the Middle East is not conducive. It's not true. It's not true, because if you look also at the problems that there are in the Middle East, even the reapproachment now that you can see between Saudi Arabia and Iran, you know, it's there. I think that the bad blood there is bigger than the good blood. And now there is an interest for quieting down the problems, also because these leaders are trying to use the energy they have, for example, in Saudi Arabia, for growth rather than for fight. Fight does not help you really. And so we do see a change, but you understand that the problems, it's not connected to the Israeli-Arab conflict. This is a Shiite-Sunni or leadership conflict. You can define it in any way you want, but clearly it's not connected to us. And what happened is that the Palestinian issue did not disappear, our problems with our neighbors, but we have already peace with Egypt from the late 70s. We have with Jordan, of course, Oslo Accords, and then Jordan in the first half of the 90s. And now these countries who had never had a quarrel with Israel really directly. So it's a changing Middle East. You know, before only Air India could fly directly on the short flights from Delhi to Tel Aviv over Saudi Arabia and Oman. And in the last few months, now El Al can fly also to South Asia on this track. So I think by definition, the fact that we have the I2U2, an economic forum, which is to explain to the people who don't live it like you and I, which is the two I's are India and Israel, and the two U's are US and the UAE. And the idea here was, it's an offspring of the Abraham Accords, and the idea is to create projects, strategic projects among the four countries. Now we are looking also out, using private sectors. So the governments are only facilitators. When there were already two projects announced in the beginning on food security and green tech, both of them to be executed in India. Success would be if we can implement a strong project to show everyone that the I2U2 is working. At the end of the day, the I2U2 is part of this approach of minilaterals that India is also speaking about it, because, you know, we had a grace period in the world after the collapse of the Soviet Union, in which the international organizations could work to some extent, cooperate together. We remember Yugoslavia and Iraq war that were agreed upon in Security Council, but this was a very short period, because from the formation more or less of the UN until that time, it was a zero-sum game between two blocks. I believe that we are back into a zero-sum game. It's very hard in the multilateral arena now to have agreement with even the P5 members, between China and the US. It's very hard to promote. So what do? You go to smaller forums of like-minded countries that share the same interest, and this is very much the I2U2, the Quad, but in different ways, because I2U2 is only economic. So our success would be to bring more projects and to show that there are fruits for the change of way of direction between Israel and some of its neighbors.
Thank you for that answer, and very comprehensive answer, Ambassador Gilon. You really put the I2U2 into context as a success for the Abraham Accords, and to actually have the participation of Arab states in a close working relationship on a small multilateral forum is I think a commendable step by itself. And to now go after defined projects and defined shared interests is something that we could further work on. But to come to the areas of economics, which I've been receiving a lot of questions from members of the audience, and you'd be happy to know that besides the members who are already participating on this Zoom call, we have over 200 students who've logged in from the Noida Institute of Engineering and Technology in Greater Noida, and there's several others watching on the digital platform through AIMA's reach. On the issue of economics and trade between the two countries, this is always a question of how can we further it. You talked about it reaching the level of $10 billion. Is trade the best way to refine the relationships, given the fact that India, as you said, is 150 times the size of Israel in whichever metric that we used? How can we further the connect between people? Yes, we've increased flights. These flights have come about due to a relationship, or maybe an understanding where the relations have gotten to, but also it's been personality led. It's been led by by Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Netanyahu. Is it possible to sustain these relations without these cult figures there for the next decades and centuries to go forward? And how can we move the relationship to a broader economic relations, where we could have a greater transmission of ideas, knowledge, ecosystems of startup ecosystems? What would your thoughts be around these areas? And of course, it would be good to know about any tactical steps that the Israeli government and the embassies is taking in these fronts in the immediate future.
So it's a wonderful question. If I would try to answer, first of all, where I see the big potential for the future, no doubt in technology. Why technology? First of all, the world is going towards technology. I mean, this is where we are going. And Israel is known as the startup nation because many of the, per capita, probably Israel is the leader in the world in many, many elements of the startup ecosystem and the investment in R&D, in the presence of international companies and venture capital, in patents. So wherever you look, the most important number probably is that around 20% of the population is working in innovation, but more than 50% of our export is high-tech. So this is the real engine of the Israeli economy. Now, India has, beyond its own innovation and technologies, India has things that Israel doesn't have. And this is market size, but also connection to other markets. So it's not only to work with India, but through India to work with other markets. And India has much cheaper labor, also in services, in high-tech, in programming, which Israel is one of the most expensive countries in the world, but also in industrial capacity. So Israel doesn't have big companies. The way startups and our economy is built mainly on the smaller companies, small, medium-sized companies. We don't have these giants, these Reliance, Tata, Adanis of India. And I think that India and Israel, that's why we also need you. I mean, the sense of going global, market-wise, products that are, they need a lot of man-hour or they need manufacturing capacity. I think these are the sweet spots where we can go and develop our relations. India cannot be a manufacturing country without technology. And I think that I don't like it. Maybe it's hard for me, but the Make in India makes a lot of sense for India because you don't want to become a manufacturing country. You want to become a technological and manufacturing country. You need to own a lot of technology in order to be able to sustain the growth of India to the right direction also. So I believe that that's where we are. And when you look at it, FTA that we worked on and was talked between the countries for almost a decade, I think now, is not going forward. I think that it's not in the immediate priority of India because of the size market of Israel and the fact that we have less defense on products, on import of products to Israel. So what India will get in return is relatively small, and what we can do on services or bringing expert workers to Israel is also we can and we want to bring, but it's in relatively small numbers in what, when India has in the Gulf 7 million people and we can bring a few thousands, it's not in the same. Although I believe that in Israel, there will be a lot of added value for people coming and absorbing part of the ecosystem of innovation, the spirit of innovation, and whatnot, and the connections there to continue. So FTA is a little bit off the track now. I hope that next year it will come back to the table. There are discussions of direct currency trading between the countries. India's central bank has already a branch in Tel Aviv for quite a long time, so it's there. It's much easier. We are looking on the Israeli side how we can improve the insurance on investments abroad. But look at it. I mean, the biggest Indian investment in Israel, Adani. Adani procured the rights for the Haifa port, one of our only two ports to the Mediterranean. and is going to run it for the next 50 years, I believe, is a very important sign of trust between our countries. First of all, it's the biggest, it's over $1 billion investment. But beyond that, it's a sign of trust that we are depositing with an Indian player, one of our strategic assets. So I think it's a good sign. Adani is looking for more investments in Israel. I know that for a fact, since my predecessor is running a lot of his business in Israel. So I think we're on a good track. If you look, you have also Israeli companies. I think the biggest Israeli employer here is Amdocs in Pune, with around, I visited them, around 14,000 employees that are working inside. So they're not giving services abroad, but they are giving services here, billing services inside India. But you have others, Teva, and there are quite a few Israeli companies here working, employing, and we are on the right direction. Our task would probably be also to connect the ecosystems of innovation. So the fact that we have between the businesses, and it will be on business basis, is good. But you asked about how we maintain it when our two leaders who were very dominant and relevant for promoting it are in their approaching their mid-70s. I think that people to people and ecosystems, and making sure that incubators to incubators, venture capitals, all that is also connected, because we connecting the roots of the cooperation, it will bring fruits for longer term and give more stability and wide base to our relation. Students to students, important maybe to mention again, the numbers are not huge, but the biggest non-Israeli student population in Israel is Indian. It's around 1,000 Indian students, especially in research. Israel does not give a lot of opportunities in undergraduate. And today, all these students who are those, and most of them, I guess, are on scholarships in Israel, because Israel is very expensive to live in and everything, they are out of excellence. In the past, we used to have scholarships that were dedicated to Indian students. And today, we have the biggest group is Indian without scholarships, only excellent scholarships. So they are the best Indian students that came to Israel, or they are better than others, and there are 1,000, and you can find them in the Weizmann Institute, the Technion, Tel Aviv University, Hebrew University, the best institutions of Israel.
I couldn't agree more. The people-to-people connect is a true sign of a relationship flourishing, and especially if it happens at the student level, whichever, be it undergraduate to postdoc, it is only value added to our bilateral relations. But Ambassador, you talked about the ecosystem and getting the ecosystems a little bit closer together, both from the startup side and the number of questions that have come up from members talking specifically about design platforms, etc. I'm sure those specific questions can be taken by, most of these questions and comments are written in the comment section, and they could be taken by your economic counselor, who could deal with some of these questions in specific. But to talk about the ecosystem in terms of grants that was put together by the leadership under, I think it was Geeta in India's context, which is a Global Innovation and Technology Alliance, which didn't achieve great success in terms of being able to foster a greater bilateral company-to-company cooperation. Are we looking at this the wrong way? Is there a role for government actually, apart from just laying the platform in terms of connectivity? And at the equal moment, while we are pushing for Indians to visit Israel, both in the context of tourists as well as business partners, is that equally happening from the Israeli side? Are they equally visiting India?
Yeah, so it's good that you mentioned the fact that we have Natasha and her team are also, she's our commercial attaché here. We have, by the way, 3 economic offices, 1 in Delhi and 2 in our consulates in Mumbai and in Bangalore. So we are well spread, I think, relatively to Israel's capacity in India. But please feel free to speak to Natasha and her team if you have specific ideas, offers, and things like that. The role of government, well, in Israel, the role of government in innovation is, the government started very well, I think, on the ecosystem, supporting the ecosystem of innovation, understanding that try to help and not to disturb. And I think that we are doing it quite well for quite a while. When Israel had 5 election campaigns in 3 years, it did not influence in the economy at all. I think it did. At least the growth, maybe it did, but the growth continued quite well. And this is a good part. I know that in India, the top-down approach is more important, more needed. It's more expected here. I don't know if we can do much more. We have on the government level, but to put more money and mechanisms that are supportive for, especially for not for companies, but for startups who need more support. There is the I4F fund that was done for our joint R&D, industrial R&D, that I think the scope is going to be widened now in order to include more startups, the ability of startups from both countries to approach this fund, which was utilized, but not to the fullest extent. Last time, Natasha informed me that this year, the number of applicants is much, much bigger than last time. So it's a few times bigger. And I'm hopeful that this year it will be utilized in a better way. When you speak about connectivity, we are blessed that El Al is going to join Air India in the flights and create from the end of October. It's supposed to start maybe more weekly flights to Mumbai, 4, I believe, maybe, or 6, 4, and another 2 flights to Delhi. So there will be more offering of flights, and I know also other Indian companies who are thinking of joining also with more flights, because flights enable connectivity. Israelis, do they come to India? It's first of all, it's tourists, of course. It's the known people who don't know, but after compulsory service, military service in Israel, some Israelis look for an offload year, 1 year to take, and devote to themselves after devoting the country 2 to 3 years, depends if you're a man or a male or a female. But India is a big part of it. South America and South Asia are the 2 places. And when these Israelis come to India, to South Asia in general, they come for a long time. They're not 5-star hotel tourists, but rather guest house backpackers who come here. They do everything that India has to offer, from Vipassana to yoga to different mushrooms that people shouldn't consume, but we have all the kinds of things that here. But they go back to Israel as ambassadors of India, I think, because they know the culture. It's a full immersion thing that they do, and you already see now the second generations bringing their own children to show them their own, to share with them the experience they had when they went to India. So I think it's a very important bridge. The compatibility between, it's not easy to bring Israeli businesses to India. I must admit, it's a challenge. First of all, our economy was always based west, especially the innovation, westwards. So the innovation in Israel was strongly supported by US individuals, especially Jewish ones, but not only. The first investments and then the first multinationals who came to Israel were Americans. Today, you can find around over 400 multinationals that are in Israel for R&D, for scouting, for each one with its own issue. Many of them, by the way, left in Israel. The companies, they bought the technology. They wanted a certain technology. The known example is Google, who came and bought Waze. Waze is the navigation system that is very much influencing also Google Navigate. That's why they bought it. But they kept Waze in Israel as a R&D platform. So it's part of Google Israel, and they don't do now only navigation. They do many, many other things. So this you can find. And that's why the success in Israel of an exit, that's the dream of every Israeli startup entrepreneur. The exit is usually, in the mindset, is towards the US. And it's not simple to change this mindset and tell them, no, India is the country where you have to come. It's not for all startups. There are startups where the natural market is still the US, Silicon Valley or NASDAQ or whatever it is. But I believe that there is another group of startups that India is the best place. In India, you would find the market, if the product is right for the market, and what I mentioned before about the manufacturing, cheap and good labor, manufacturing and everything. So I think, and money, of course, here is not a problem. So it's a work. It takes time. Also, the ease of making business in India, I guess that you would know, is a little bit still to be desired for. Israeli startups, as I mentioned, most of the companies are young, small, medium-sized companies. They struggle for money, and if it takes you in India to see first revenue twice or three times what it would take you in Europe, for example, it's a problem because these companies need revenue to survive. So we find more mature companies are the ones who are entering India from Israel. It's not 100% compatibility, but I think that there needs to be also on the Israeli side a mindset change in order to have better and more technological companies coming here. The more established ones, they come here very happily. They have the money, the patience to spend, the financial patience, I mean, to spend here. And Checkpoint is doing good business here. Okay, so it's not one of the leading cyber defense companies in the world. I don't think they have complaints about the business in India, for example. So that's life.
No, I think you bring up a sector of cyber, which I did want to spend a little bit of time on. But before that, Ambassador, the cost value proposition is fundamentally different in India than it is from the United States. And the research and development has traditionally, as you pointed out, been more westward looking in terms of the value proposition. And so therefore the price points are a little higher than what the economy typically can acquire in India. My brief interaction with Israeli companies is also that they seem to think that it's easy. One of the easy markets to approach is government business or pseudo government or businesses that are in some manner or the other controlled by government, be it in agriculture or be it in other places which are regulated. I think that may be the wrong place to start, because especially for startups, those are sectors which are difficult to enter into. They have a lot of bureaucracy. They take very long from decision-making perspective. And so that's just some comments from my side. But parallelly, I think a significant amount of opportunity exists in terms of harmonization as well as creation of new standards, especially on areas such as new designs and platforms in the digital economy, where they have inherent strengths in both ecosystems. India has a wealth of knowledge as well as workforce in the IT domain, and the innovation ecosystem in Israel is creating newer products, such as in cyber. Where can we strengthen this so that we can actually establish standards and take this partnership to third countries and to the globe? Does that potential exist, and are there conversations which exist on the lines that I'm talking about?
Yeah, Israel is probably, if not the leader, one of the leaders in the world in cyber security. It's, again, the necessity is the mother of all invention all along our history, but also here, because Israel is also the most attacked country in the world when it comes to cyber. So, we have both sides of it, and that's why we are also very advanced in it. I believe that IT is very strong in India. IT is very strong in Israel. But here you have big integrators that we don't have. So the IT technologies developed in Israel should be, in a normal time, integrated through the big IT integrators in India, who have customer base, who have the services. We are usually less good in this part of business growing and developing than India. And I think that will be a very strong place for cooperation in general. IT, the world is going that direction. And the more you have IT, the more you need cybersecurity, because you're more exposed, because more things are going to the online for you. So I do agree. I don't think that there is a lot of discussion on regulation, as you call it, and stuff like that. We are doing, by the way, very interesting work. Israel initiated it in the world. We started in the US and India now through Niti Aayog as a partner. And this is in the future world, we'll have a lot of UAVs, civilian UAVs flying over our heads in cities. You know, you will have thousands in any given moment bringing medicine to you from the super farm or the pharmacy, and bringing spare parts for your car into the garage, and pizza to your son at home when he's studying, and all of that. And how do you manage, by the way, all these UAVs in the future to make sure you have no danger and collisions and effectiveness of use of all that? So we did a huge experiment, for us huge, with thousands of drones or UAVs at the same time flying around. And how do you coordinate it when the operators are different? It's not one operator. Of course, the pizza guy operates and the spare parts guy operates, etc., etc. So this is, and Niti Aayog is also part of this experiment. So we are not doing a lot together, but at the end of the day, companies, when they get together and they are from the same field, they have the same interest, they will find the right ways to do it. I'm not sure the governments are irrelevant, and I agree with your remark that it's better not necessarily to start with governments. Some projects, by the way, are only government, you know, local governments or federal governments, but you go to big in water. Our advantage when we come today to deal with India, for example, is we see it as integrative water planning. Israel, again, in water, because we are an arid state, 2/3 is a desert, and the rest is also arid or semi-arid. As a world leader in water, reuse of water, we reuse for agriculture 90% of our water. The next country in the world is under 30%. So we understand that there is a price tag for water, because we also do a lot of desalinization, which costs money and uses a lot of energy, and it's not necessarily the best solution. So to minimize the desalinization, if you can reuse water, of course, everything is much better there. So in the water side, beyond bringing specific technologies, we have the knowledge how to do an integrative planning. This was an agreement between the two prime ministers in a specific project in Bundelkhand, UP, of doing it. And the idea is to look at the resources, that there are water resources in the place, and adjusting the resources, how to maximize them, and adjusting them to the right agriculture. One of the issues that we found here is that in India, not only the small plots of the farmers that we all know, but also traditional farming. So, you know, it stays in the family. If 5 generations are doing the same growth or wheat or some kind of vegetable, it continues because it's part of the legacy. But, you know, our world is changing. Water resources are changing. Land is not as good as it used to be because of time and use and everything. So how do you maximize? You take the right agriculture thing that will maximize the profit of the farmer and use the minimum amount of water resources, etc., etc. So this is where governments are more relevant for us, for example, as a market, rather than private sector.
No, I fully agree that specifically areas like water, where Israel is by far the benchmark in terms of being able to look at efficiency globally. The second country is so far behind; it's not even worth. It's not even a comparison. But it's a much more holistic ecosystem. Not only is there technology at play in recycling in Israel, but there's also appropriate policy. The fact that, as you pointed out, that Israel is 2/3 of it is a desert, and the fact that you've been able to now convert what is essentially a majority desert country into a water surplus country, and to be able to export water to your neighboring countries is a true credit to innovation. But it's also a credit to policy, where you've looked at water as an economic good and priced it accordingly. I think we in India have to learn not only the aspects of technology, but how that technology has to go side by side in terms of policy to be able to have the impact that we all aspire towards. I think that there's significant areas for us to learn in not only areas like water, but also in other ecosystems that are developed, especially around innovation. Ambassador, you pointed out in the beginning about, and I'd left the aspect of defense till the end. because it was recently in the news that the Heron has been adopted into our fleet of drones, but that equally is a Israeli product which competes against the Predator, which is a US product. This competition between Israel and the US on defense products, where Israel's ecosystem in defense is still reliant on the US, does that create any conflicts, firstly? And secondly, the indigenization efforts of Make in India and Buy in India, etc., for the defense, is that something that is being accepted by Israeli manufacturers? And how keenly are they viewing India as a market, both in terms of establishing a presence, as well as co-manufacturing and co-development? Co-development meaning moving up the value chain in terms of actually building for India.
Yeah, so it's always a very complicated and good question. I will say that thanks to instability in the world, especially around Ukraine, Russia, but also in this region, when these countries feel threatened, there is a lot of demand for weaponry and defense systems and all that is connected. I think the last 2-3 years, there is a surge. The Israeli companies also feel it, like many other international companies who are suppliers. We supplied India also at times where the US refused to supply. So now when the US is on board and competing with us, so I don't think there are any impediments in the ability of Israel to supply. Make in India, as I said before, I think for India it's the right thing. I'm not sure that India is 100% cooked with itself. How do you make in India defense? Defense is more complicated than any other field. For example, our companies are complaining again and again about the Indian demand, which they say is unprecedented in the world, that 51% will be controlled by India. And they say, why does India need it? Even if India will have 49%, when you want to pass a very sensitive IP to India, to make it make in India, India gets all the benefits anyhow. The technology will be here, the manufacturing will be here, but for self-calm and assurance, when you give the IP, you want to know that legally you're still controlling it. So I think there India will have to rethink, because you will get the benefit anyhow. Why do you want to create the impression that you want to control the IP? You have the IP. You don't need to legally be the owner of the IP in order to, and this is the thing that Israeli companies are doing joint ventures in a few countries in the world. This is the thing that is a concern for them. But in general, the Israeli companies are ready to comply with the Make in India. In some places, it's even helping because our manufacturing, the demand is bigger than our manufacturing capability now. So doing not only for India, Make in India for the rest of the world is also a possibility in some lines of defense. If you look at the new Indian plane carrier, the defensive systems are Barak 8, as we call them, but there is an Indian name to that, which is an anti-missile system that is defending it, Make in India, including the technology and everything. So it's a joint R&D in a way. So I believe that the potential there is really, really great. I think India has to be a little bit faster on the Make in India and understanding what it wants. The Predator had a competitor, which is the Heron TP, the most advanced Heron of IAI. And we were working on doing the Heron TP as a Make in India. The Predator is not a Make in India deal. It will be or maybe made in India in some elements, but not the Make in India model. But we are ready also on other elements to be, our companies speak about it because they see India. Again, if you look at the short term, no company would come here to Make in India and defense because the risk here of competition and losing control of your IPs and everything, it's in the back of the minds of everyone. Don't be mistaken, Israelis or others. Okay, it's not by coincidence that the Americans will not do the Predator as Make in India. Okay, it's part of calculations of risk taking and everything. But since our companies look at India as a strategic partner, medium, longer term, I think they are ready to do that because they understand that you start a relationship here when you do the Make in India, which is more based and can be beneficiary on the longer term. Shorter term, by the way, probably you make less money, by the way, because more is passed into India, of course. But I think that's the impression I had with talking with our CEOs of these three major companies. So they see India as a trusted partner, not short term even, medium, longer term. And I think the potential is really big there.
Thank you for that answer, Ambassador. It's very encouraging to know that both the private sector and government-owned companies are both viewing India and the ecosystem of India in a trusted manner, especially from IP. Of course, there exist issues in terms of ownership of IP and majority control of it, which is fully understandable by most of the members here who are in the corporate field. Ambassador, the strength of the relationship that India and Israel have is increasing year by year. Do you define any targets for yourself as an ambassador as to what you may wish to achieve in, let's say, in the next year? How would you hold your economic counselor responsible? Do you have, like in companies, we set targets. We as the All India Management Association try to propel management theories and practices which can not only aid in terms of accountability, but measure performance and help aid that growth. How do you view this from a perspective of a diplomat? And do these corporate practices translate into the diplomatic parlance?
So, you know, as a seasoned diplomat, you don't fall into the trap of setting targets that you may not achieve. You know, it's very dangerous. In the private sector, everything is measurable. When in our system, it's harder to measure because we plant, and Natasha, who's working for the Ministry of Economy, our commercial attaché, and myself, we plant a lot of seeds. We really plant a lot of seeds all around, meaning we do a lot of meetings. We take Israeli companies to meet Indian relevant companies. We make the connections. We do roadshows. And I invite everyone, by the way, to come to Israel, come in groups in the same sector. It's very easy. If you do that, it's very easy for us to expose you deeply into the sector. So, you know, mixed groups is a little bit harder. But if you tell me I'm really now an IT group, we can give you 3-day, 4-day, very extensive and intensive, it will be intensive, trust us, tours of Israel and meeting real companies and ecosystem players and understanding, and please do that. So we plant a lot of seeds, and it's not that we know how much where it will go. We try to do the system part, which is the FTA, the trade insurance and all that we try to do because this is the framework. Okay, I do want, if you ask me where I want to be, I would love to be with an FTA agreement. You know, I'm not a great economist, and I don't know how much it will contribute to our trade. It depends really, I think, on what is also the content. But I do know that our relations are so close that they deserve having an FTA, even if it's not maybe the most thing. It's also maybe as a message to everyone about the intimacy of the relations as it is. So just to manifest it also to people outside the close circle of the people who know how intimate our relations and our cooperation are. And we didn't speak about intelligence cooperation, counterterrorism, and other elements that are soft in the term of not being money oriented, but they are very, very important to both countries. And military to military, Indian forces training, joining an international. When I went with Jay Shankar to Israel, it Blue Flag, an Israeli Air Force maneuver that with many countries, including for the first time then Indian jets joining there. So I think there is a lot that we do. By the way, we didn't touch even what we do here on government to government on agriculture. We have over 30 centers of excellence around India, where the ownership is not by Israel, but by the local partner we have, which usually is the local government, where the farmers can come and get technologies that are not the state of the art, but they are what they need. Maybe state of the art of 20 years ago, but for the small farmer, that's exactly what he needs. And I just here in Haryana lately, I heard from Dr. Sawhney, who's in charge of the horticulture, and he told me we were visit together one of the centers in Haryana, where he said that the average farmer, if he would adopt this technology, which is not too sophisticated for him, and would get also 70% subsidy from local and the federal government, he will have 4 times the yield he had before. So this is a big impact that we can make. We have another 15 centers like that. By the end of next year, probably we will have around 45 active centers of excellence in about 22 different states in India. And I'm very proud of this. They don't see an Israeli expert. It's, as I said before, capacity building. The Israeli experts will come for the establishment of the place. By the way, the last one I inaugurated, 95% of the hardware was done in India. It's already all moved, some of it originally Israeli, but Israeli companies here, or Israeli companies procured here, or other companies from other places not connected to Israel. And everything is made in India already. So it's a big shift. The technology is already here. These about 2 million farmers so far in the years it's active. They went through these centers of excellence to see technology. So I'm very proud of this part. And again, it's not bringing dividend, but it's the people-to-people part. As you mentioned it, and I mentioned it, people-to-people, I think, is the most important element as a diplomat that I can do. We do business to business too, but the basis for real relations are people-to-people. When this is there, and we saw that with India and Israel, by the way, the political will came after the people were already there. So the support, the popular support to relations with Israel, after being part of the non-aligned movement for years and everything, it came from the people. I think that it was very easy for Prime Minister Modi, for example, to decide to go to Israel, to go to and improve the relations with Israel significantly, because he knew that it's a popular move. And as a politician, when you make a calculation, it's a win-win, because if it's helping India and popular by your voters, this is really a good move. So we work a lot on people to people, but also business to business.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Gilon. I took it for granted that a lot of the members who are participating today, which now I should tell you exceed 1,000. We have over 500 members joining in from LinkedIn and Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Over 300 on live with us today, and another 200 students. So we've all benefited from your wise words, but I did take it for granted that people were familiar with the depth of relationship that India and Israel share, especially on the developmental side of agriculture and water, as well as the deep relationships that we have as a trusted partner and supplier on the defense side. Thank you again, Ambassador Gilon. We are virtually here, so I would ask everyone to give a round of applause, but maybe I'll do that on behalf of everyone. Thank you very much for your time, and we greatly look forward to expanding the relationship that AIMA has with Israel and to take more delegations there in the near future. And we shall be in touch, and I look forward to meeting you again soon as well.
Thank you very much, and have a lovely weekend, and exploit the invitation you have to Israel. We promise you that if you organize a serious group, you will get a very serious serious program in Israel, and we'll see many counterparts in your own field. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you all. We have finished the program now.